Hi, everyone. My name is Ambriehl Turrentine. I am the Assistant Director of Marketing and Communications for the Destiny City Film Festival. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us for our 9th annual edition of the festival. We're very happy to be back in person, but also online this year. And of course, I'm very happy to have Justin Zimmerman with me right now. He is the director, among other things, of the film The Other Border. So Justin, would you like to give just a little quick introduction, maybe about yourself and the film?
Yeah, so I'm Justin Zimmerman. I'm a filmmaker in Portland, Oregon. You can learn more about my work at brickerdown.com, which showcases the wide array of stuff, including links to Jack the Radio Creatures, which is also part of the festival, which I'm jazzed about. And then, of course, The Other Border, which is just finishing a several-year film festival run, and I'm delighted that it's going to be screened at the Destiny City.
And thank you so much for sharing your work with us. And actually, since you mentioned Jack the Radio Creatures, of course, this is about The Other Border, but these are drastically different films. So I just want to kind of ask you, what's your approach to filmmaking? Like, what brings you to certain stories?
Yeah, I mean, I love storytelling. I work in both teaching. That's kind of my day job if I'm not doing corporate work. But then I split my time between social-oriented documentaries and comic books. And so Jack the Radio Creatures is cool because I edited the graphic novel that comes from and then directed the animated music video for the band itself. And then The Other Border really represents a lot of my socially oriented passions and was able to bring a completely different side of storytelling and filmmaking to bear. So I think if my career over the last 20 years can showcase anything, it's that you shouldn't limit yourself on the story. If something is compelling and interesting to you, don't feel like you have to stay in one track or one silo. Try to take all your skills and bring that story to life any way you can if it's important to you.
That's great. And so everyone watching this, definitely be sure to watch Jack the Radio Creatures as well. We are screening that as well. So look that up. But to get back onto The Other Border. So first of all, how did you meet Gordo and how did this project get started?
So I went to my undergrad at Ohio State, my graduate studies at Ohio University, and the Zimmerman family, kind of born and raised in Norwalk. So even though I came up in New England, I spent a lot of time in Ohio and have a lot of connections there. And so when this event happened, I was already connected to a number of folks there, including my cousin Kim, who really helped originate the project from the ground up. It's always neat going home, and it was kind of intriguing to go back to Norwalk and work on The Other Border. I had done a major project, a documentary called Fireland that's on my YouTube channel for free back in 2004 and 2005. So 15 years later, going back to some of the same places and meeting with some of the same people in the community and the journalism community in general, was almost, I don't know, there's not really a word to describe it. It wasn't nostalgic. It was almost eerie in a way, but it was also familiar. And Fireland was about a very intense social situation. Obviously, The Other Border was too. So it does go to show that stories and I think important national and international stories can truly happen everywhere. And so being ready to again bring your storytelling skills to bear, you've got to be ready to jump.
So did you kind of instantly know whenever you heard of it that this is something you wanted to turn into a documentary?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I was asked to come in and help bring the project home. So I went and filmed a couple times, spent a lot of time with archival pieces, tracking down a press from a variety of sources, and then spending time with the family and getting to know everyone so I could make sure I was representing their story to the best of my ability. We also decided to shoot on 8mm and 16mm film in particular, which was a new path for me. I mean, I've shot with film before, but never exclusively with film. And it was the first documentary I've done again in almost 20 years where we didn't have sit-down interviews in any conventional sense. I mean, it was every aspect of film was either gathered through archival sources or actually shot on film and on a wind-up kind of Bolex film camera. with 100-foot daylight spools. But it was important for us to, when you normally hear these stories and you see them in AP photos, they're very digital and very removed, very newsy. And Gerardo's story is, and Karime's story, that's our story, I think. I think it's a national story. I think it's a family story. And I wanted the film itself to represent that kind of feeling inherently through the actual medium itself. That film really lends itself well to that. And that's why we made that leap.
So was it your decision to shoot on 8 and 16 millimeter, or had other people kind of brought it up, or what?
I think it was a group decision because we have access to that material. I'm probably the last generation of filmmakers to shoot, edit, and finish on film. And so when it became apparent that that could be a part of the process, I decided that I wanted it to be exclusively film. And that helped out, I mean, again, a ton. We also got Gerardo to film his actual release from the prison, obviously on iPhone, and that's a completely different medium, but that brings its own feel to the midpoint of the film. So you use whatever tools you can in your toolkit, but to me, it was essential that every aspect of the film was anything that we could shoot. I wanted it to be on film from beginning to end.
And you mentioned earlier that you took some time to dig through archival. As I was watching, I mean, obviously the whole thing is shot on film. So there were some points where I was like, is this archival footage or is this just shot on film? So could you talk about the archival and just that process of finding it and editing?
What's interesting is that the stories on the ground were very different from some of the archival and news stuff we got. It was a very quiet operation, but there was some media that was there. And so a lot of what happened appears to have happened off camera. But we were going back to national news sources based on the reporting that was going on at the time. But we were also spending time with the local news organizations and the local photogs to figure out, okay, what did they get that nobody else got? So even if they weren't right there in the middle of everything, like some of the photos that we were able to license were, they showcased some interesting aspects that weren't really captured by that group. So part of your job, I think, as a storyteller, especially as a documentarian, is just to get as many primary pieces of material as you possibly can. I always think about it like a rescue mission. It doesn't even matter if it's going to be in the film or not. You never have any idea. So you just go and you try to capture and collate everything you possibly can and make sure that you have a big a field of vision on the topic as possible. In this case, it was essential for us to really be there in the community as much as possible because we grabbed some really amazing things as well.
And you're an editor, correct, also on this film?
Yeah, I think it was essential for me once I kind of really dove in. I think it was really essential to shape the film from the ground up as a particular kind of story. And editing is really where you bring all of that to life. And it was small and containable enough. I mean, it was hard work, but it was small and containable enough that I really could do that. I was there for the color correction in the color correction lab. The sound mix was done remotely. Of course, the score, which is amazing, was done remotely. But even there, I was able to, through the glories of Zoom, kind of be a part of all of those pieces of the puzzle. But again, I was working with an extraordinarily talented team, a small but really amazing group of people. And I think the film, as short as it is, just showcases such a wealth of talent that I was really glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, I was going to mention the runtime because it clocks in at a little bit over 7 minutes, I think.
Yep.
It's a very concise story. So were there parts of the story that you had to cut to get that runtime? Like, did you want it to be that short, or just kind of tell me about the story and the editing, how it all came together?
Yeah, I mean, I'm of an opinion as a creator that things should be as short as they can be, especially if it's a short film, because it's not sellable anyway. I was also the executive director of a film festival. I've been on the board of many others. And to me, a shorter and concise piece will get into a bunch more film festivals than you like trying to hold on to all your babies. Like, get it to where it needs to be, no more, no less. And I'd much rather an audience say, wow, I'm motivated, this is exciting, I want to know more, than say, oh, that was a little too long, or oh, I'm bored. So you really have to think about the medium of film itself. I mean, it doesn't sound like 8 minutes is a long time, but in a corporate world where people want things 30 seconds or less, 15 seconds or less, I mean, 8 minutes can be an eternity. So there's always a great scene. There's always something in every film I've ever done. And I've done features too, where you're like, oh, this is the greatest film or the greatest scene in the film, but it doesn't work. And so it has to go. It might take away from everything else, or it might detract from something, or it simply doesn't fit. And that's kind of your role as the editor, and certainly as the director, to make sure that the piece is as strong as it can be as a whole. It's hard for people to let go of certain things, but I mean, I think you have to be ruthless and think about not even yourself, but someone sitting in the audience watching it for the first time. Are you giving them the best experience, regardless of whether or not the film is 2 minutes long, 8 minutes long, 75 minutes long, or like these recent superhero movies, 4 hours long? I mean, I'm assuming somewhere along the way, someone said, this scene's got to go or else it's going to be 17 hours. And so I commend them on that, no matter what the final length of the film is.
And I want to ask you about the end of the film also. We see something during the credits. Could you kind of talk about that and what that scene was?
So, part of what's amazing to me about being involved with the culture is to literally be involved with the culture. I mean, shooting in the church, which is very important to that family, having that massive street festival that they're part of. And there wasn't really a way for that to fit into the film as it was. But I love the fact that I could bring that into the project, over the credits themselves. But to me, the idea of the church and the street festival and the costuming and the religious ceremony all just continues to visually reinforce the fact that these people, these young people who, and there are millions of them, I mean, at least 1 million of them in our country, do not deserve to be ostracized. They do not deserve to be demeaned, and they certainly don't deserve to be jailed and deported. These young people, I mean, if you want to argue about their parents, which I do not, but if you want to argue about their parents, that's one thing. But these children do not deserve to be placed in a jail because they were brought over to our country when they were 6 months old and have lived as part of our communities this entire time. Their families pay taxes. Their families are with us, including at churches on Sunday. It was a beautiful thing to be a part of, and I needed that to be part of the film, and I found a way for that to happen.
Yeah, it is a beautiful ending. So I really enjoyed that part. And I did want to just kind of ask if you could elaborate on your general experience being in these spaces, what that was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever you are a filmmaker, I've been a teacher and a filmmaker for a while, and I think your responsibility is to move into another space, regardless of what the space is, with respect and quiet, to listen, to make sure that you are part of the community, not outside of the community, to make sure that you are welcomed and invited and not that you are intruding. And I know that's a general answer, but I think in any situation, you have to constantly ask yourself, am I supposed to be here? Do I have permission to be here? Am I part of this conversation, or am I trying to steer this conversation in my own way? When you make a film, you have to edit, and you have to take all this material and put it into a story. That's part of the deal. But while you are working in that way, you have to always be thinking about what your responsibility is to the people that you're working with, and to your audience, who are going to be, some people are going to be experiencing these ideas for the first time. And so there's a special responsibility there as well. But I am happy that over the course of my time making films, especially documentaries, I've never, ever had an issue where anybody I've worked with said, oh, I was represented incorrectly, or this doesn't feel true to my experience. You're ultimately responsible, but it's always a partnership in the best circumstance. In this case, the family was able to see it on the film, or on the big screen, for the first time in Ohio at a film festival where it won the best documentary. And they spoke about it when it was done. And that's my favorite moment, where they're not only watching their story, but they're actually part of the conversation surrounding their story.
Yeah, I was going to ask actually, had they had the opportunity to spend some of these festivals with you, since you have played at a number of festivals, but also kind of going back to the beginning of the story, were they apprehensive to share their story with you at all, or was it just kind of a smooth process?
No, I mean, I think because we were from the community and because we knew so many of the mutual partners, they were frank. I mean, I can't speak for them specifically. I can just tell you that they were incredibly welcoming and generous. And I think we're happy that someone was taking up that story. I mean, I think part of it is just because it's surprising that more people aren't discussing this exact issue. But if you look at the Congress, for instance, who've been kicking the can for decades on this kind of thing, I guess it's not a shock. But in terms of this case, I was so happy to be working with that family, and I believe they were very happy to be working with me.
Great. And how are they doing now, especially Gerardo?
So, on one hand, I know this might come as a shock to the viewers, but after the election, things changed, at least, under the hood, so to speak. The direction went back to where it was previously, but legally nothing's changed. I mean, literally nothing. He still legally could be deported at any day. Only now he's a husband and a father. So a tragedy just compounds. And it's my hope that in its small way that this film continues to keep the conversation alive and gets people to continue to want to talk to their representatives and push the idea that, again, if nothing else, that the Dreamer Act and some of the more socially responsible legislation gets passed and soon. But unfortunately, it does not seem like that's a major focus for the Congress at this time.
And I do always like to ask, is there anything literally anything about the film that you'd like to share that I maybe wouldn't think to ask? It could be an anecdote or anything you learned, anything you experienced throughout the production.
No, I mean, to me, again, it's important to take big issues and try to find the people in them. And so the whole film was constructed around that very idea. Literally, the film was constructed around that idea. And I think if people are moved at all by this story here, I just ask humbly for them to see how they can get involved in their own community. It does feel like these issues are far, far away from us, no matter where you live in the country. But if this shows anything, it's that, whoever thought a watershed moment in modern immigration discussion would happen in Ohio, of all places, but it did.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, of course, for sharing The Other Border with us, and also Jack the Radio Creature. So again, people watching this, please make sure you tune into both. Any parting words you'd like to say? Anything?
No, I really appreciate you checking out the film, and I'm looking forward to submitting a film here when you open back up again, and hopefully spending some of next year with you in person.
Yeah, of course. And, since you brought it up, I do want to ask, is there anything you can share about these upcoming projects?
Yeah, if you go to soldierdocumentary.com, you can watch the brand new trailer. But I did a film all last year and just finished it in January, and I think the trailer will speak for itself. But I'm very excited about it, and it's, surprise, surprise, another intense, socially oriented issue with a pretty amazing lead character.
Great. Well, thank you again. I will definitely be looking forward to your future work, and I'm very glad you could join us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.